Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have the distinct pleasure of doing an interview with Mr. Ken Hyde of the Wright Experience in Warrenton, Virginia. Ken has often been referred to as the third Wright brother because of his historical accuracy of everything he does in relation to the Wright brothers. So good morning, Ken. How are you today?
Morning, Bill. We're fine. We're fine. It's good to be with you.
Good to be with you as well. Now, behind Ken, you'll see that he's in one of his warehouses, and the background happens to be the 1909 military flyer that was constructed by Wilbur and Orville, and it was the first plane that the U.S. military actually bought. So, Ken, what inspired you to originally pursue your interest in the Wright brothers? Why did you do that?
Well, I was restoring airplanes, and so many Wright airplane enthusiasts build um, some kind of a look-alike with a modern engine and that sort of thing, and that didn't fly with me. I wanted to get a customer that would sponsor the project, and luckily, the Army, U.S. Army, contacted me to build a reproduction of the Wright Model B, and I thought that I gave them an 18-month contract and thought that would be a piece of cake to build. And 6 months later, we were still trying to find blueprints and materials that we needed. But the drawings and things were just not there. So that meant we had to look at every B part we could get, and but we completed it in 24 months instead of 18. And after building it, I realized it was a much better airplane than I thought it was going to be, and I built one for myself as well.
Oh, there you go. Now, I know your background as, a captain for American Airlines for many years gave you the ability to fly all over the world and meet lots of people. I suspected that getting the materials for the right aircraft and trying to be as accurate as possible, especially with fabric and struts and finishes and things of that nature, uh, would be very difficult. And as you said, you were sourcing materials for 6 months. How were you able to even find some of this stuff?
Well, there it's very difficult in that we've uh, changed the manufacturing system now. If you want an oval shaped tubing, as an example, which the Wrights used for to hold the chain guides, uh, you contact the steel tubing company and they want a $10,000 for the tooling, and they want you to buy 1,000,000 feet of it, and so forth and so on. And at night you wake up and you think, how the Wrights make this? So you come down to the hangar and you get a piece of 1 inch round tubing, put a 1/2 inch square bar in the middle of it, squeeze it with the vise, and it comes out to the exact dimension of
There
what
you
the
go.
right.
Well, I'm sure the Wrights weren't investing $10,000 in getting an oval tubing at that point in time.
No, sir. Well, the purpose of the Wright experience basically is to make sure that when we build a Wright airplane, a Wright flyer, that it be exactly the way they built it. So when we put that airplane into a wind tunnel and evaluate it, that we're getting good data. We know that this was a Wright product.
But you really got into this because, as you said, there were no plans, there were no drawings. Basically, there may have been some sketches and a couple of photographs and letters back and forth between the Wrights brothers and their sister and what have you. But I'm sure this was not an easy task because you are known as producing the most historically correct and most accurate reproductions of the Wright aircraft anywhere in the world. Most of the stuff that you see out there is just a hodgepodge of stuff to give a visual that looks like something, but it's not accurate at all. You even mentioned to me that one of the planes that was hanging in the Air and Space Museum in Washington had different deficiencies in it, and they weren't correct.
Well, that's true, but the Smithsonian strives to get as authentic airplanes as they can, and we've been very fortunate that they've invited us to put some of our reproductions on display for as long as 8 years, which is not in their charter. They want real airplanes, but there are none. They've the Wrights a lot of times cannibalize the last airplane they made to proceed with the progress of the next airplane. So some just don't exist.
That was probably a cost-saving measure on their end, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. The only thing it saves us is uh, they kept meticulous notes in these little giveaway uh, po- chest pocket booklets that the bank gives you and others, and they kept a log of everything they did.
Well, so tell me about the first one you ever built. How did you approach that, and how difficult was it the first time?
Well, I always wanted to uh, get another customer that would be interested in me putting an airplane together. And Fort Rucker, Alabama, Aviation Museum inquired about us building the Wright Model B. And so we built the airplane, and in the process, we realized it was really a good airplane. So we built one for ourselves as well. Today, we've got 4 Wright Model Bs out um, in museums across the country here.
So the Wright Model B was the first one.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
And at the end of the broadcast tonight, the mission to chase history, recreating the beginning of flight. We're coming up on 100 years later.
This was a story that was never told, and I consider it the world's greatest detective story.
Finally this evening, trying to go 120 feet in 12 seconds. That's how far the Wright brothers traveled during their first flight in 1903. As much as aviation has progressed, you might think that recreating that flight for the 100th anniversary this year wouldn't be so hard. But nobody has ever figured out precisely how the Wrights did it, which is humbling in this day and age. A year ago, ABC's Ned Potter went to see the man attempting to recreate the first flight. Now he's gone back again.
You have no idea how hard it was to get this far. He's off the ground. Towing a handmade glider behind a station wagon in a field near Warrenton, Virginia.
Oh, look at that surface, solid as a rock.
100 years ago at this time, the Wright brothers were also teaching themselves to fly, on the way to their first powered airplane. Ken Hyde has made it his mission to trace their steps.
It is literally much harder to re-engineer something and find out exactly how they did it in many ways rather than invent it.
Hyde is the retired airline pilot who has been chasing the Wrights for 10 years now, copying their plane with the same tools and materials they would have used.
So this propeller was so efficient that they were able to carry, with only 12 horsepower, they were able to fly.
Many parts have had to be reconstructed from photographs and letters, since the Wrights, fearful of copycats, left few other records. But Hyde says his group's plane is authentic. They've even copied the fabric for the wings. Pride of the West brand muslin, originally meant for ladies' undergarments.
All this should culminate at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina on December 17th, the 100th anniversary of the first flight. If luck is with them, they will fly at the very same hour the Wrights did.
But that may not be easy. Their test flights have shown them that while the Wright's plane was a work of genius,
Oh, man.
it was terribly unstable in the air.
Slow down. Let go. This is as difficult an airplane as to fly as I've ever flown.
Hyde's group has now made a computer simulator of the glider.
I'm sliding my hips to steer, and it hurts.
It is as unforgiving as the real thing.
Hold your speed.
It's dozing down, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Nothing you can do about it.
I just crashed.
That's right.
But for the sake of accuracy, Hyde says he will have to take his chances.
It is hard to fly, but once you get used to it, and you get used to the fact that it is a very unstable airplane, it's becoming much more easy.
Which is why, whenever the weather cooperates, Ken Hyde and his fellow dreamers are up in the air again,
Beautiful.
chasing history.
So the Wright Model B, you said it was a good airplane. Why?
Well, they had learned a great deal of more about stability of the airplane. Most of the Wright airplanes are very unstable. You can't let go of the controls at any time, and you're very busy keeping it right side up, you know. But the B was one of the best and most balanced airplane that they built. And Orville said they built 138 of the two-pusher type airplanes, and we believe about 65 of those were Wright Model Bs. So it was the most popular factory.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's the one that everybody wanted then, I guess, right?
That was a really practical airplane to own.
You know, a few weeks back, I had a conversation with somebody down in Kitty Hawk, where you've been involved for many years and had various aircraft there and demonstrations and things. And right now, today, they tell me that they have a one of your gliders out there, and what they're actually doing is they're allowing people to come and for a fee train on how to fly that glider and then actually flying it. So they're getting some experience on an actual reproduction of a Wright glider. Tell me about that a little bit, because you produced that glider.
Yes, the best of I just bragged about how good the Model B was, but the best and the most stable airplane they built was that 1902 glider. And even from their wind tunnel test, they kind of split the numbers to build that as a training airplane. And we have flown that airplane quite a bit. It's been at Kitty Hawk Kites at Jockey's Ridge State Park, just down from Kitty Hawk. John Harris and his crew have a lot of ultralights for flying off of the sand dunes there. And we put them in charge of taking care of the customers there. And so it's been there since 2003. And it attracts all kinds of people. Paul Glenshaw's son flew the 1902 when he was 7.5 years old, so it's a very
Oh, wow.
safe airplane, and
Very safe.
so they're still flying it today, and that's a long time since 2003.
Yeah, and I was fascinated to learn that they're actually doing what they're doing, because what better place than Kitty Hawk, where it all started, basically, right?
Absolutely, they've got the right winds and they got the soft sand. If you do hit the ground hard, it's not too bad.
Okay. Ken, your aircraft are so well respected that, I mean, nobody in the world produces anything even close to what you do. And I know that many of the better museums have acquired, one way or another, your aircraft to put in their museum and showcase their displays on the Wright brothers. Can you just tell us some of the museums that you have aircraft in?
Yes, sir. We have like the 1903 airplane. The Park Service invited us to build an authentic 1903 flyer. So the flyer that's at Wright Brothers National Memorial at Kitty Hawk is one of our reproductions of the 1903. We have a 1903 that we flew for the centennial. We just got a short hop on the off the rail because of the rain. That was sponsored by Ford Motor Company. So the Henry Ford Museum has one of our 1903 flyers, and Seattle Museum of Flight also has one. So we've got 3 of those flyers out in the public.
And then you have the Little Butch. Where is that?
Oh, yes, Little Butch is Woody Edmondson was a well-known acrobatic pilot. In fact, in 1948, he won the world's champion acrobatic with a little airplane called Little Butch, and Little Butch was a cut-down model of a monocoupe, and they put a bigger engine on it, and he was quite the he was a local guy from Virginia, and he kept it here in Washington D.C. And that airplane ended up being donated to the Smithsonian. It hangs now in the Hazy Center in Dulles. I found an aircraft way up in New York State called the Farman Sport. It was a 1922 airplane built in France by the Farman Company, and it was a little two-place wooden airplane, and it has the record for the slowest airspeed. It's
Oh, wow.
very safe. And I gave that to the Smithsonian because that was the only one in existence. And the 1900 Wright glider, the Smithsonian did not have that airplane in conjunction with the other Wright airplanes. So we donated that and it's at the Wright Gallery downtown and at the National Air and Space Museum.
Uh-huh. And then the Air and Space Museum in Chantilly had one of your aircraft, which moved recently, I believe.
Yes, they've been very, very courtesy of allowing us to exhibit our airplane. And so they just, for about the last 4 years, we've had a 1908 military flyer in there. And because the new Army Museum is being built at Fort Belvoir, and it's completed now. I'm afraid it's not open to the public like a lot of the museums are today till we get rid of this virus. But and we had a Wright Model B there for 8 years, and we have parts and pieces in a shipping crate. We made the copy of the Wright shipping crate, and we encourage the docents to get the littlest kid to hand out wing ribs and half a propeller and roller skate wheels that they used and hubs. People want to touch things and they can't touch original airplane items in the Smithsonian, of course, but they can touch our parts and pieces which are replaceable and no one can get hurt. So it's been a very successful program for us, and we've had airplanes in there for 7 or 8 years, and they're really terrific to work with.
Oh, that's great. When I visited you down in Warrington and actually was in the warehouse that you're in right now, one of the planes that fascinated me the most was the Vin Fizz. I mean, that looked like, a luxury aircraft for the time, between the seats and the engine and the radiator and the way the components look, it was almost like jewelry. And then to see a bottle of a drink with the Vin Fizz label on it on the wing of the aircraft really fascinated me. I'd like you to tell me a little bit about the history of the Vin Fizz, but Ken, give me an idea about what was the story behind the Vin Fizz.
Well, the armor company came out with a new grape drink, and they called it the Ideal drink. And so they wanted a lot of advertisement because they wanted to topple Coca-Cola if they could. So they put up a $30,000 prize for the first person that would fly across the United States within 30 days. And they painted the VinFizz and the grapes and the advertisement all over the airplane. They provided a train and locomotive that they painted white, so whoever was flying cross country could follow that train if nothing else. And Cal Rogers of the Naval Cal Rogers, was the pilot, and the Wrights built the airplane. They cut it down in weight and size, made it single place. Wilbur flew it, and he loved it because it was a fast and turned quickly, and so he had nothing but good comments about it. He crashed, I believe, 33 times going across the United States, and he had a box. He had railroad cars for spare parts and pieces, and he had living quarters. His wife was on the train. His mechanic was on the train. Charlie Taylor, who had been working with the Wright brothers, he went on the train. It was quite an operation, and it's a beautiful little airplane, and it's further back, and you can't see it behind my head. But it was not a successful drink. It was a syrup that they would send to the pharmacies and the soda jerks, and if they mixed it not exactly right, it had a laxative effect. So it did not win out over Coca-Cola.
So much for the VinFizz.
Yeah.
You know, when I visited you several times, I was very impressed seeing some of the original Wright brother engines. For their time, they seem to be just way ahead of their time. And you happen to have several of them. And not only that, but Greg, who works with you, okay, could have been working for the Wright brothers because that guy knows those engines inside out, and he's like a restoration artist. I'm sure that Wilbur and Orville would have loved to have Greg in their factory at that time, you know. But tell me a little bit about their engine and their engine developments.
Absolutely. And I'm so lucky to have Greg Cohn because he is interested in the subject as much as I am. The Wrights wrote to 7 or 8 automobile companies and engine companies when they were getting ready to building the 1903, and the requirement was that it would be around 8.5 horsepower is what they needed. And all of the bids that came back, they want to sell them a one-cylinder engine or a 2-cylinder engine, and they were heavy cast iron and so forth. And as a result, they figured we were going to have to build our own. And they had Charlie Taylor, who was a great machinist, come on board, and Orville would sketch the parts they want, and Charlie Taylor would manufacture the parts, and they were successful. They were one of the first that used aluminum, Alcoa aluminum casting for the crankcase to keep the weight down. And they wanted 8.5 horsepower, and they ended up with 12. And they were elated, like any pilot would be, to never have enough horsepower. It's not true with the Wright airplane. The airplane would have flown a lot easier if it was 8.5 horsepower. And we've determined that with Norm Crable, who is a fine aeronautical engineer, that that extra horsepower caused the airplane to be right up against the point it's almost uncontrollable. So more horsepower is not good. in some
Wow.
cases.
But I saw an 8-cylinder engine that you were restoring of theirs there. That was pretty progressive for the time, wasn't it?
Very progressive. There was a contest, speed contest in St. Louis uh, that they decided to uh, compete in, and they built a lightweight version of the EX model, basically the Baby Grand is what they called it, and they were very stubby, short wings, and it was a real tricky airplane. And they married two of the 4-cylinder engines together to make a V8, and about 60 horsepower, 65 horsepower, and they had a young pilot that worked with them, and they put him on it. Well, let me back up. Orville flew the airplane twice. Once at 72 miles an hour and one at 74 miles an hour. Brookings, the young kid that was going to fly the airplane for them, he lost a fuel pump in the process of flying, and the airplane crashed and didn't finish the program.
Wow.
But to show you how advanced the Wrights were, Graham White from England won that contest at 62 miles an hour. So that's a big difference in what the Wright airplane was doing.
You know, you've built a lot of Wright aircraft. What's it really like to fly one?
It's Well, the best one is the 1902 glider. It is very comfortable. It's stable. It's easy to fly, um, and you're so close to the ground, landing and so forth. Uh, Everything seems very fast, and it's not. It's very very slow and very careful. Um, the Wright Model B is a bit of a tricky airplane in the sense that um, you've got to be able to uh, coordinate the rudder and with the airplane. It's very, very touchy, and uh, but it's probably the best of the lot, and they had the safest record. They were doing high altitude climbs to 11 and 12,000 feet.
Really? Wow.
And run out of fuel and then glide back down and land.
I'm surprised that they were able to get to those kind of altitudes, though. Really, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
In your career, you've flown every kind of aircraft there is. When you were with American Airlines and all that kind of stuff. And from everything that I've learned, it's very difficult to fly the Wright brother aircrafts. They're not easy, and they're not forgiving, from what I've heard. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. You
Yeah.
know, uh, they invented the airplane, but it was years later that they had stable airplanes and safe airplanes in the sense that they needed a great deal of skill to fly them. Now they were fortunate in for years the years prior to the first 1903 airplane, they were flying gliders, and some of those were not exactly stable. But they had the feel of the airplane, so they could fly the O3 for that first powered flight.
Uh, you know, we're going to talk about propellers in a minute because I know you've done a lot of research and a lot of development, a lot of testing, but I want to talk about the propeller that I saw in your office, which is hanging on the wall, all smashed up. Tell me the story behind that one. What's the story with that smashed up propeller?
I deny I know anything about it.
Oh, I see.
No,
Okay.
no. I was test flying a Wright Model B, and uh, I ran out of altitude, speed, and experience all at the same time, and I ended up putting it in a tree. And I woke up with some fireman at the bottom or lady calling my name, and I'm had a goose egg on my head and I had a broken arm, and I'm
Well,
up in this tree.
it's a
And,
great conversation piece, let me tell you.
yeah, it is.
Okay,
Well,
in your work with the Wright brother propellers, I know that you've put an inordinate amount of time into configuring them and, researching the way that they were able to manufacture their propellers that were way ahead of their time. And I know that in what you were doing to reproduce them, you actually went and had your propellers wind tested at various wind testing tunnel facilities to make sure that you were getting them as accurate as possible. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
yes, we're very fortunate to have a lot of universities and test facilities interested in what we were doing. The propeller was the last thing that they left on the to attack to learn about. They left it to the very last end because they knew it was going to be complicated. Uh, there was a blade element theory and as a momentum theory that people used to help build props. The Wrights were the first to marry those two theories together to come up with a prop. And the propellers are the same airfoil shape as the wing. And they got that information from their little wind tunnel that they used in their shop. But they never patented the propeller because there were a lot of other people in France and other places were all coming up with props, some good, mostly bad. But when they saw the Wright brothers fly or Wilbur fly in France, the cat was out of the bag. So everyone was successful now with the propeller.
Uh,
That that first O3 propeller is 84% efficient, and the best we can do with a wooden propeller today is between 82 and 84%.
wow.
So for the
They were
first
really
time out of the box,
they were really ahead of the game at that point then.
they really were, and they knew it, and it's probably one of their biggest inventions and the greatest gift that they gave us.
I know that you were very impressed with the mathematic developments of the Wrights, and most people don't even realize what was involved in what they did. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, people like to say that the Wright brothers were high school dropouts, and that's not totally true. Wilbur completed high school, but the family moved to Dayton, and he never went back and got his certificate, but he graduated from high school. Orville was so interested in other things about the eighth grade, he decided he didn't need any more school. But their father, the bishop, was very smart in that he had all of these good math books, and they were dealing with calculus and trigonometry was a piece of cake for them to do, and all of that tied in inventing the airplane, not only just the propellers but the rest of the airplane as well.
Mm-hmm. Ken, my last question is that when you visited the original Wright brother manufacturing factories in Dayton, Ohio recently, the head of the National Park Service asked you to sign a poster of the Wrights. Tell me about how that felt being asked to do that in that place that you spent a good part of your life, learning about, reproducing, and being involved with. How did you feel? How did you feel when you were in the buildings? How did you feel when you signed the poster of the Wrights, where other people that are of a stature that were invited to do that, you joined an elite crowd by being on that poster? Tell me about it.
Well, it was quite exciting, for sure. But the you can almost feel their presence at factory buildings. They were used for other things after their company was sold, for automobile parts and pieces, and for the war effort, of course, in World War II. But they had two buildings, and they were cranking out airplanes and doing very well. And sadly, Wilbur died of typhoid fever, and Orville lost a great deal of his interest, and and also the ability to do what they were doing. These guys would argue into the night over a subject, and then get up in the morning and say, "I think you were right last night." No, no, you were right. So you could see how that interaction back and forth, it was a great problem solving ability of these two men. And when Wilbur died, half of that disappeared, and Orville was just a normal human being. And he did get some patents. He did get a patent on a split flap that was used in World War II, but mostly he just measured and went to his laboratory every day and worked.
That's quite a story. Well, Ken, I want to thank you for spending the time with us this morning. It's been very informative, and there's nobody that knows the subject like you do. So I want to thank you very much, and this is going to be available for everyone and anyone to see on all of the social media channels. Copies can be obtained by contacting either Ken or myself. And also, I just want to mention that, Ken spends a lot of time on the Wright brother aircraft, but their shop also restores historical aircraft. So if you have a historical aircraft that needs repair or remanufacturing or replacements, the Wright experience in Warrington, Virginia, and Mr. Ken Hyde are the right people to do the job for you. Thank you very much, Ken. Have a great day.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it. You too. Thanks much.
Okay.
And visit when you can.